And I'm really pleased to be given this opportunity of sharing my experiences and my thoughts with you. And I'm indebted to the organizers, particularly Dr. Kulwant Singh, for giving me this opportunity. Now, my topic would be recycling beverage cartons, policy and regulatory issues. Now, this is something which is very important for our country, although it appears that we have not really gone into the dimension to which we may face problems in future. But nonetheless, it's not too late. Now, I'd start with a small saying of one of the proponent of sustainability, Annie Leonard, who said, "There is no such thing as away. When we throw anything away, it must go somewhere." So we must be very careful about that somewhere. Now, this is my first slide. So first of all, I'd like to, bring the gravity of the situation. Do we realize how grave the situation is? While picking up a drink carton in a shop or a mall or opening a milk pack in the morning from our fridge, do we realize that very serious problems are already lurking? Now take a multi-layer carton, which on an average would have 75% long fiber paper, 21% plastics or any other polymer, and of course about 4% aluminum. Now, these constituents or these proportions may vary depending on what is the content inside the carton. Now, the problem starts from here. Number 3, the long fiber in the paper segment, it comes from slow growing coniferous trees which need a cold climate, and they cannot keep up with burgeoning demand, which is increasing by the day. You would remember that in India, strong paper bags or wet strength paper bags are still not available widely. Why? Because of one of these reasons. Because for wet strength and strong paper bag, you need long fibers, which rarely grow in our country. Now, the fourth point is resource efficiency through maximizing recycling could be a smart solution. But the problem is the length of fiber gets reduced during subsequent recycling and the strength is reduced. Now, here is the main problem. I'd like to very quickly dwell upon this, because we can convert a particular carton, used carton, into something else. But if we want to reuse it again for containing some food item, then this problem comes up. Now, recycling also involves cleaning of the used cartons and certain chemicals, which raises the risk of harmful substances. There may be residual substances left, which jeopardize further use for food storage. Now, one solution, of course, is use of recycled material to an extent, along with strict quality control. Maybe we go for 10%, 5%, whatever. But if we look at putting food item inside, we have to be very careful about the quality control aspect. Therefore, I have again, put it in bold. Number 3, quest for more sustainable material should go on, parallel with whatever endeavor we have for recycling these cartons. But the quest for more sustainable material should go on. Now, today I shall be discussing about the policy and regulatory issues. The starting point would be the regulatory framework in India through the various rules, and these are not adequate in taking up the issue of recycling of beverage cartons, because see, we have not gone really in depth. If we look at the MSW rules, that we have divided it into 3 streams: biodegradable, non-biodegradable, and domestic hazardous. So we have not gone into depth of the non-biodegradable or the recyclables. Now, Of course, there is a provision for setting up of MRF for sorting of recyclable waste. But again, reaching the used beverage carton is not directly mentioned here. Now, apart from the solid waste management rules and the plastic waste management rules, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Government of India has prepared the National Resource Efficiency Policy 2019. And it is this document where we have some rays of hope. Now, they have suggested creation of a dedicated institution, which could be called National Resource Efficiency Authority, or NREA, which would provide for the regulatory provisions of this policy. That means we are narrowing to or focusing on to the cartons here. Now, NREA will have members from line ministries, from state governments, government agencies, and of course, the stakeholders, meaning the industry bodies, the other stakeholders and interest groups. Now, an interministerial, along with the NREA, an interministerial National Resource Efficiency Board, in short, NREAB, will provide necessary guidance on the aspects critical to the implementation of this, the rules across all sectors. Now, the authority would set up the provisions and the act, and the board would give the guidance. Now, developing and implementing resource efficiency strategies will be carried out by concerned line ministries and state governments, with NREA providing collaborative setup. Now, in the priority sectors, packaging has been mentioned here, which is something quite great. And in the waste sector, the plastic packaging also has been mentioned. Now, the role of government, as mentioned here, is to facilitate setting up material recycling zones. But in my feeling, I mean, as Dr. Singh said, I have almost 4 decades of experience behind me. I think still we have a long way to go. But anyway, NREA and NREAB may be approached for looking into specific sectors, such as beverage cartons, and their appropriate recycling in accordance with the circular economy. That could be one of the strong points of approach. Let's now look at some of the countries, what they're doing and how their reaction has been to this important issue. Let's take Japan, for example, where a mix of regulations and voluntary efforts are really pushing it up. Now, voluntary efforts in Japan start from schools, where the students learn and actually perform collection, cleaning, flattening, drying of different types of packages, which they use themselves. So they learn as they do all these things, they practice and they learn. So it gets into their headset, into their mindset. Now, the Packaging Recycling Act of Japan, which is the application of EPR to packaging policies, this was set up in the year 1995, quite long back, about 26 years ago. And the title of the EPR-related legislation, the Act on the Promotion of Sorted Collection and Recycling of Containers and Packaging. So they have gone into depth, much deeper than what we have kind of attempted here. Now, the Act requires that the designated producers and importers must recycle to required specifications. I flag it again, to required specifications. And that's very, very important, because there they even think of putting it back into the food stream. Now, the Act is like this. The municipalities have been responsible anyway, as it is in India. Now, this Act introduced EPR, that is extended producer responsibility into the recycling of waste packaging discharged by the households. So this, right from the source, EPR is being thrust upon. Now, in order to fulfill the recycling obligations, the designated producers can either collect and recycle waste packaging that conform to the specified sorting standards by themselves, or outsource the recycling to PRO, that is Producer Responsibility Organization, which is the Japan Containers and Packaging Recycling Association. Now, we would have a little more into this a little later. Alternatively, the producers are exempt from obligations if they collect it themselves and do the recycling. Now in this, the producers of beverage cartons are also included. Now here is an example of voluntary effort. Japan Soft Drinks Association, or JSDA. This is like our AARC here. Now containers and packaging 3 R's promotion, or the third voluntary action plan, which they had prepared themselves for the years 2016 to 20. This was about paper container for beverage. Now collection rate achieved between the year 2016-17 was 43.4% against a target of 50%, very commendable. And they had also a target of reducing the weight of the carton so that less and less material is actually used. So for a 500 milliliter milk carton, in place of 3 grams of target of reduction, they could actually achieve 2.94 grams, which is quite commendable. And this was in the year 2017. Now we are looking at, let's look at the European Union. Now in 94, they had this directive. The directive aims at harmonizing national measures for the management of packaging and packaging waste and improving the quality of the environment by preventing and reducing the impact on the environment. So that's the desirable goal. And the later directive, which was the EU 2018 by 852, that's the latest amendment of the directive of 94. And this contains updated measures to prevent the production of packaging waste and promote the reuse, recycling, and other forms of recovering of packaging waste instead of its final disposal, thus contributing to the transition towards a circular economy. Now here, there is another issue which actually the industry bodies have been dealing with. The directive as amended requires EU countries to formulate national programs that would be country-wise, as well as EPR schemes would be there, other economic instruments, and to minimize the environmental impact of packaging. And they have also given a calculation, they should encourage increasing the share of reusable packaging put on the market and of the systems to reuse packaging in an environmentally sound manner without compromising food safety, which I was just mentioning a little earlier, or the safety of consumers. That is extremely important. Now, these would include deposit return schemes to push it, deposit return schemes, targets, and economic incentives. These 3 could really put the focus of the consumers on this and push the program. And the EU countries must apply the new calculation rules for reporting on the new recycling targets to be achieved by 2025 and 2030. Actually, it so happened that as per the old calculations, most of the countries like Germany, Spain, Italy, they had given their projections and very good figures like 85% for Germany. But as soon as this new calculation norm was introduced, that 85% rolled down to about 48% or so. So here they are actually calculating by the components, just like that. So the targets now have been put like this, item-wise or component-wise. So at least 65% by weight of all packaging waste must be recycled. This is by December 2025. But at the same time, the individual targets are like plastic 50%, wood 25%, ferrous metals 70%, aluminium 50%, 70% glass, and 75% of paper and cardboard. So these have to be individually achieved, and the overall can be 65%. So this would be a much more stringent way of calculating, but of course, the impact would be much more much more impacted. No. By the end of 2024, EU countries should ensure that producer responsibility schemes are established for all schemes. Now, we have, our time is very short. So let's quickly look at USA, what they're doing. Now, almost at the same time, RCRA, that means the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of the US, RCRA section 6002, that requires that US EPA, or Environment Protection Act, to develop guidelines for the use of government agencies for procurement of products which would contain recycled materials. So right back at those points, they had thought of putting in government procurement materials which have recycled content, and that would be guided by the US EPA guidelines. Now, a comprehensive product guideline, or CPG, that was issued by the US EPA, in which paper and paper products containing recovered material were also included. Now, the National Container Deposit legislation was also put in place. Now, in July 2002, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee had considered a very important act, which was called the National Beverage Producer Responsibility Act, in which 80% of recycling rate was proposed, and the beverage companies were to submit recycling plans to US EPA for approval. But somehow this was not passed at that point of time. But this was a great step. Refundable deposits on beverage cans were also proposed, which could really commercially push it further. Most importantly, the US FDA, that is the Food and Drug Authority, is responsible for pre-market review of new food contact materials. Again, I'd like to flag this, that if we want to put our recycled items for the food chain, there has to be a very strong method or protocol for checking that the recycled cartons or the packaging materials are safe enough for putting in food. Coming to our way, what should be our way forward? We have looked at what we had done. We have looked at Japan, EU, and the US. Now, because we have a very short time, so I didn't go into other countries. Now, so far, there is no specific policy or guideline or regulation in our country. In my opinion, it's my own private opinion, our best bet is to approach the National Resource Efficiency Authority and the National Resource Efficiency Board and bring the issues and problems before them. Possibly it's a little too early, but we have to start right now. And we should take all these issues to them, give representations to them, detailed representations to them, so that they could consider this. And in consideration, there should be a graded plan for financial and fiscal support need to be worked out. It has to be worked out along with consistent R&D and reliable laboratories for product quality assessment and certification. These are necessary for confidence building. Please remember that unless the confidence building amongst the consumers is there and the government agencies is there, there's not going to move further. It's very important that we are able to build that confidence. And the industry bodies have to take up voluntary efforts to set up targets and standards on their own. That is voluntary standards, as it is called. And the governments, both central and state, should continuously monitor them and provide support wherever deemed justified. So in my opinion, the industry bodies have two roles here. One is that they can approach the NREA and the NREB. And second, they can make a graded plan and a voluntary effort to set up targets. So set up targets or standards on your own and go on with that. So in times to come, the government would definitely look into that and would definitely put it forward. Now, voluntary efforts in India, an example, of course, are the Action Alliance for Recycling Beverage Cartons, or AARC. This was launched in 2018. And like JSDA in Japan, they're also doing a great job. I have knowingly put both the things here. So the AARC also can take a leaf from JSDA and see if they can do some course correction. Now, on their own, AARC had defined a 5-year EPR action plan, which would cover collection and recycling commitments, then advise the members as well as the collection partners on proper data keeping, which is again extremely important, because as we know, data or reliable data is extremely important for making any plans. And they also help members significantly increase the collection of paper-based cartons in the last 3 years. So now possibly they have to look at the points which, I mean, as per my personal impression, which I have discussed in the previous slide. Okay, so thank you very much for a patient hearing.